Have you ever watched someone get humiliated? Not for what they did wrong, but for who they were? That's what happened to Claire, a woman who walked into church hoping for peace, but instead walked straight into judgment. Until one unexpected voice, a quiet widow no one had noticed in years, stood up and changed everything. Claire tightened the belt of her modest navy dress, her hands trembling just a bit as she stepped out of her car in the church parking lot. It had been nearly 4 years since she'd last walked into a church. 4 years since her divorce, and the whispers, the cold shoulders, the stares. But today, she wanted to try again. Not to prove anything, not even to reclaim faith. Just to sit, listen, maybe feel human again. As she stepped through the heavy wooden doors, her heels echoed against the marble floor. Her eyes scanned the pews. Some familiar faces. Some she remembered from back when she and Peter used to come together. But now, there was no hand in hers, just Claire, alone. The murmurs began quietly. Isn't that Claire? The one who left her husband? No, he left her, remember? But still, coming back here? She lowered her eyes and slipped into the third row from the back. Close enough to listen, far enough to leave. As the choir began their hymn, Claire tried to sing, but her throat felt like sandpaper. The woman 2 pews ahead turned and gave her a glance, not cruel, but cutting. A glance that said, "What are you doing here?" Claire blinked rapidly. She didn't want to cry, not here. Then the sermon began, and it wasn't subtle. Pastor Dwight, a man she once shared coffee with after services, now stood tall behind the pulpit. "We must protect the sanctity of the family," he said loudly, looking directly toward the back rows. "A house divided is a house the devil walks through." Claire froze. Was this about her? She felt hundreds of eyes, invisible but heavy, crawling on her skin. And suddenly, the warmth of the sanctuary turned to ice. How? Have you ever felt out of place in the one place you thought would welcome you? The service ended. Slowly, people rose. Claire stayed seated, hoping the crowd would thin, hoping she could slip out unnoticed. But fate doesn't always grant quiet exit. Claire? Claire Matthews? It was Diane Stokes, PTA president, Sunday school leader, the type who smiled through clenched teeth. Claire stood awkwardly. "Hello, Diane." "Oh my, it's been years. I was surprised to see you back. So brave of you to come alone." The emphasis on alone wasn't subtle. "I just wanted to attend," Claire replied softly. "Of course, though some of us were a bit confused after everything that happened. You know, your choices." Claire's lips parted. "My choice?" "Well," Diane leaned in, lowering her voice, "leaving your marriage. Coming back like nothing happened. It sends a bit of a mixed message." Claire felt heat rising in her face. She hadn't left Peter, he'd left her. For his dental hygienist, after 22 years of marriage, no explanation, just a text and a silence that screamed louder than any argument. "I didn't come here for judgment," Claire said, her voice breaking slightly. Diane offered a polished smile. "Oh, sweetie, no one's judging. We're just concerned for the example it sets." Claire took a step back. "I'm not here to set an example. I'm here to heal." She turned, walked away, and didn't realize someone had heard every word. "When was the last time you spoke up for yourself when no one else would?" Claire didn't return the next week, or the week after. But on the third Sunday, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Hello?" she answered hesitantly. "Claire Matthews?" A soft voice spoke. "This is Mrs. Iris Mayfield. You probably don't remember me. We used to sit behind you and your husband years ago." Claire searched her memory, a thin, silver-haired woman who rarely spoke but always smiled gently. "I remember you," Claire said. "I heard what happened. I was there that Sunday. I'm sorry I didn't say anything then, but I'd like to invite you for tea, just if you'd like to talk." Claire was stunned. "Why me?" "Because I know what it feels like to be shamed for something you didn't choose." 2 days later, Claire sat in a cozy floral upholstered chair, a warm teacup in her hands, and tears streaming down her cheeks as Iris gently patted her hand. "You're not the first woman this town judged," Iris said. "When my husband died, people treated me like I was broken, as if I didn't belong in couples groups anymore, as if I was a reminder of something they didn't want to see." Claire nodded slowly. She finally understood the pain of being othered wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was silence that cut deepest. "Why did you invite me?" Claire asked softly. "Because kindness doesn't knock, it opens the door." Who has quietly lifted you in a moment you thought you were invisible? The following Sunday, Claire didn't want to return, but Iris insisted. And this time they walked in together, arm in arm. Whispers echoed again, but this time something was different. Because Iris Mayfield didn't sit in the back. She walked straight to the front pew, the one reserved for elders and long-standing members. Claire hesitated, but Iris tugged her forward. Then, just before the sermon, Iris stood. The room fell silent. "I'd like to say something," she said. Pastor Dwight nodded, taken aback but respectful. Iris turned to face the congregation. There was a time when this church welcomed the broken, when grace wasn't just a word we embroidered on pillows, when love looked like something. She paused. "I've watched us turn into a place where people whisper instead of welcome, where silence replaces support. Claire Matthews didn't come here for pity. She came for peace. And I, for one, will stand with her." Claire's mouth dropped open. People shifted in their pews, uncomfortable, unsure. But then, someone else stood. Then another. And then a young father, then an older man with a cane, then a single mother, all standing in silent solidarity. The room wasn't quiet anymore. It was full of breath, of beating hearts, of change. Would you have stood with Claire or stayed seated in comfort? The weeks that followed were different. The stares softened, the whispers turned into greetings. Claire began volunteering at the food pantry, started teaching Sunday school for teens, even joined a small Bible group led by Iris herself. She wasn't just tolerated. She was welcomed. One Sunday, as she packed up books from the church library, she noticed Diane watching from the doorway. Claire gave her a gentle smile. Diane walked up, hesitating. "I judged you," she said bluntly. "I thought I was protecting values, but I forgot the greatest value of all." "Which is?" Claire asked. "Compassion." Claire nodded. "It's never too late to start again." Diane smiled faintly. "You've changed this place." Claire shook her head. "I didn't. A widow did." She glanced toward the front pew where Iris sat quiet, unnoticed as always, knitting a small pink hat for the church's newborn outreach. That Sunday, the sermon was about second chances. And for the first time in years, Claire sang. Not because she had to, but because she belonged. What if your act of kindness could help someone feel seen again? Would you offer it today? In a world so quick to judge, sometimes all it takes is one voice to say, "You belong." If this story touched your heart, help us spread kindness. Please like, share, and subscribe to The Kind Story, where compassion lives and stories like Claire's remind us what truly matters. Disclaimer: this story is an original work for The Kind Story, created by human writers with AI assistance for formatting and narration. It reflects real-life inspired emotions and adheres to YouTube's community guidelines and monetization policies.